think the most memorable time I've had at the Cinema Museum was they hosted a one-day festival just for British silent films, and that's my area of specialism, so that was a great day. And also they had live music and accompaniment, and it's a really great space for live music as well as for films.
We hosted a Power of Story launch event with the programme. So from South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, we have a project working with older adults and people with dementia where we capture stories of their life experiences. And in February this year, we hosted an event here with Department of Health, with Health Innovation Network, with colleagues from SLAM and with service users and carers. And it was a wonderful event.
I think the thing I like most about the Cinema Museum is the range of stuff that it has in its collection. So it's got films, but it's also got furniture from cinemas, ephemeral items like posters and programmes and stills from movies. So it's got a real range and it gives you a real sense of the experience of cinema.
I like the fact that it is a museum that prioritises the promotion both of film and the industry of film and the creative arts, but it also does it in a way that supports local communities. So they support our groups that we have here, and I know they do lots of things at weekends with families in the neighbourhoods that otherwise wouldn't be able to access other cinema experiences.
I don't know so much about the other museums in Europe, but compared to the other cinemas museums in the UK at least, I think this is the only cinema museum that's entirely staffed by volunteers. All the other ones are connected to a university or to a film archive. And also every object here has a story. Everything's been collected through some kind of adventure. I really like the sense of history in that.
Well, two things really. The people, they are a passionate group of people who support this museum, and also I would argue some of the artefacts that they've got here, unlike some of the other cinema museums where everything is protected and the public can't get as much access, people can really interact with this museum in a way that's not possible in some of the other cinema museums.
And what I like about that is that it's a very different style of filmmaking, so you get a sense of something that's very different from the kinds of movies you'd see now. It's also a period when lots of things happen for the first time, so it's a very formative period in film history. So you can see how some things develop that are then going to set the template for the rest of film history, really.
The 1980s for me, because that's kind of when I first had my experience of first movies, and I'm a bit of an 80s fan.
Well, well, the space that the museum's in, the building itself, has a very long history reaching back right to the Victorian times. So it's part of a history of London as well as being history of cinema. But in terms of the collection, what's interesting about the material in the Cinema Museum is that in a way, a lot of it was never really meant to survive. It was produced to be shown once or you read once and then thrown away. So it's kind of an accident that these things have survived, and I quite like that sense of holding on to that ephemera. Really.
Well, working at the Maudsley, one of the things I find really important is the history of this building, actually, and the way they've tried to convert it to an extent, but keep the original history of it. So it used to be a Victorian workhouse. There also used to be services here that were for homeless people and mental health services, and they've retained that ethical pulse throughout the work that they do. So I think that's the most important thing, what's been the history and the memory and the purpose of this building throughout the years.
I think what we can do is support those projects and go along to the events, take part in different community outreach programs. There might also be things we can do in terms of petitioning local councillors or local government to invest money in keeping these places alive, and showing that they're a useful and an important part of the community.
I think it's by making sure that the community, as well as the local politicians and the local organisations, support it, and also the film and creative industries themselves. Without these kind of archive museums, people will forget the important work that's happened throughout cinematography and film.
I think it'd be really sad if the Cinema Museum closed for younger generations. For me, one of the things I like most about it is talking with the founders, Ronald and Martin, who have their own stories of growing up with cinema, and they're a real link with the past, and lots of the material in the collection are a link to a time when cinema going meant something very different. So I think it would be a shame if that experience and that memory was lost, and especially for people who are growing up in a time when cinema going isn't really an everyday thing. We're much used to seeing films in other types of location or on our own. So I think that sort of history is really worth preserving.
I think it would be massive. One, because it's a community resource. There are lots of groups, older adults, younger children. There are many groups that come in and use this facility. And I think without it, it will be very difficult in an area that is becoming extremely commercial to find somewhere where communities can feel safe and valued and not rushed and not have to spend a fortune. People just won't have anywhere to go in the local area.
Absolutely, I'll definitely consider protesting. But I think there are other ways as well in terms of fundraising and trying to show to local authorities that we care about this place.
I would probably, in terms of a protest being a marching protest, probably not. That's not my style. However, I would probably use my networks and my communications and try and influence the politics of that decision. It's a very important venue in a key area of London. So that's what I'd do.
Difficult question, but for my own research I've been looking a lot at cinema programmes because they tell you about how, not just what films were shown, but also how cinemas presented themselves to the public. So I think I would, if I can take the whole collection of programmes, I'd do that, I think.
I would take an 80s poster off the little music booth in the main room.
Unique.
Inspirational.